welcome everybody. I'm Howard Friedman. I'm the director of the Jewish Community Library, and it's really a great pleasure to have all you here this afternoon. I do encourage you to stay after the program to buy a book and also to browse the collection, which includes on those tables there a display of books that include quite a few that are from the list of resources at the back of the Rabbi's Suitcase that Robert Kehlmann used to research in the course of researching the book. And you're welcome to borrow any of those. If you're new to the library, please do know that everything is free of charge and our borrowing policies are very liberal. And even if you don't borrow something, you can use our ebook program, which has a unique collection of ebooks and audiobooks on Jewish topics. And also, if you don't have our new program brochure, please do take one. It's a purple one. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our presenters. Robert Kehlmann is an internationally acclaimed glass artist and art critic whose glass work has been acquired by major museums and showcased in prestigious exhibitions and publications. An honorary lifetime member of the Glass Art Society, he has authored 2 books of art criticism and been awarded NEA grants for both his art and his critical writing. And Carole Joffe is a professor at UCSF Bixby Center for Global Reproductive Health and a professor of sociology emerita at UC Davis. Her research focuses on the social dimensions of reproductive health with a particular interest in abortion provision. Her most recent book with David Cohen, which is available here, is After Dobbs, How the Supreme Court Ended Roe, but Not Abortion. Please join me in welcoming both Robert Kehlmann and Carole Joffe.
Thank you, Howard, and thank you to the library for having us, and thank you all for coming, and those who came from the East Bay for going through the ordeal of trying to get across the Bay Bridge. Still has us a little rattled, so it'll take a while to settle down, I'm sure. But take it away.
Well, I also want to thank Howard for facilitating this. I want to thank all of you for coming, no matter how you got here. All those special chops to the East Bay travelers. So I'm very delighted to be here and to participate in this. The Rabbi's Suitcase is really an extraordinary book that can be read on so many different levels. Today we'll be focusing on the issue of women in Mandate Palestine, forging their own identities. But the book also has extraordinary historical material about what life was like in Mandate Palestine, what it was like the blow-by-blow descriptions of what it was like to get to Mandate Palestine in the late 19th century. And all of which is to say this is a wonderful book, and I am delighted to be part of this. So Robert, before we get into the substance of our conversation, which, as I mentioned, is the enduring challenges faced by women in shaping their identities, I have an aside question. After a long and successful career as an artist, as Howard told us, what made you shift your focus to writing a novel?
Well, after 45 years of solitude in my studio, from 9 every morning till 2 every afternoon, often 7 days a week, I thought I'd take a break and spend 12 years of solitude in front of my computer. But I think what it really comes down to for me, and there was an interesting story in the New York Times about this maybe a year or so ago, about this man named Morandi. I remember his name because the same as the Italian painter. Was living on this deserted island off Corsica. And he lived out there for something like 40 years by himself. And they eventually threw him out, wanted to turn it into a national park. And when he came back, the press interviewed him and said, why would you want to spend 40 years by yourself on an island? And his response was, well, what's important to me in life is to have a successful relationship with time. And I think that really is the essence of it for me. Kevin Roach, the architect, said, "You're not alive unless your mind is active." And for me, it's always been a question of where is my mind active? Where am I engaged? Where am I happy getting up in the morning, going to work, and looking forward to each day, often 7 days a week? And I found that in researching the book.
While writing,
And
did you
writing.
did you have regrets that your mother wasn't still alive so you could ask her questions? And maybe here you might want to just say what the book is about.
Okay, just out of curiosity, have you all read it? How many have not read it? Okay, well, let me just fill you in briefly then. Originally, it was a 1,000-page manuscript. It was very long. I had to reduce it to about a third to publish it. But if I'm going to tell you the story, I'm sort of reminded of Woody Allen's line when he took an Evelyn Wood reading class long ago, and he said, I read Exodus in half an hour. It was about Jews. So, in short, it's about Jews. It's a 3-part book. The first part deals with getting my family out of Lithuania around to the Holy Land. They left around 1880. The next 2 parts focus on the families arriving there. Then we largely skip a generation and we get into my mother and her relationship with a man who then was called Reuven Borstein. He later changed the name to Barkat. Can you all hear me okay? I tend to mumble, so let me know if I... Okay, good. He later changed his name to Barkat and became a very important person in the founding of the State of Israel. An ally of Ben Gurion, one of the first speakers of the House of the Knesset in the new Israeli state. But at this point, Reuven is a newly arrived immigrant, also from Eastern Europe. And he and my mother meet very young. She's 15, maybe 16. He's a few years older. And their relationship is, they're into breaking all the rules. They're both coming out of rabbinic families. And they want to live in the 20th century. So that's the drift of what happens. He goes to Strasbourg to study. When he comes back, she goes to New York ahead of her family to try and find work to support him, where he's later studying at the Sorbonne, and to support her family who follows her. And the book is largely about their correspondence. They're a part of the 5-6 years of the relationship. They're apart more than they're together. And they, had a very passionate relationship. They miss each other. But we'll get into it in more depth as we go along. In terms of whether my mother were alive when I was writing it, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, of course, there are a million questions I would have loved to have asked her. There were the million questions she would have loved not to answer. So it's kind of an iffy thing. It's unclear to me how much more I would have been able to bring to the book had she still been alive while I was working on it. She always said she wanted her story told, but her sense of her story being told is of her coming to this country, marrying my father, forming a successful middle-class life, being able to bring children into a non-stressed kind of a world. So that's the answer, yes and no.
Talk to us a little bit about the hurdles you had to overcome in writing this novels, and maybe explain about the letters.
Yeah, well, the novel was inspired by a stash of letters I found in my mother's belongings after she died, and they were from Reuven. These were very passionate letters. They engaged in postal sex, really, while they were apart to stay close to one another. So my mother certainly would not have been happy with that aspect of the book, I'm sure. She saved the letters. I take that to mean she wanted them preserved and she wanted her story told. And my sense is if they had the courage to live the life that they lived, I should have the courage to write the kind of a book that reflects it. Lots of difficulties of getting a translation. The Hebrew is not the same Hebrew that people who learned Hebrew in this country read easily. So I had to find basically an Israeli to translate it. And it took a while researching the histories there. But some of the really interesting aspects were in terms of uncovering family documents and finding out what was there is the different stories that came down along the male line and along the female line. A big one is that when my great-grandparents first had children, the female story was that they had 3 sons, all of whom died of circumcision infections. The male story is they had 2 daughters who died of unknown circumstances. So make of that what you will. You'll see when and if you read the book how I navigated that, how I altered that. Another very interesting one along those lines is the story of my great-grandmother, who both male and females agree was spirited out of Eastern Europe because a nobleman, which I take to mean a non-Jew, was interested in her and they wanted to get her out of the country quickly. So they took her to the Holy Land and to what was then just an outpost in the swamps, Petah Tikva. It's a big city today, and married her off to the village Shochet, the kosher butcher, who was 30 years older than her, perhaps more. So she played in the yard with his daughters. And each time she had a child, she ran away back to her parents who were in Jerusalem, and they couldn't afford to keep her. So they sent her back to him in Petah Tikva. The male story is that he and she met at the Western Wall. They fell madly in love right away, love at first sight, and lived happily. So a lot of different stuff comes down in different ways through families, and often it's biased by sexual preferences. That's how history gets told. Another great difficulty for me was writing about my mother's sex life. And this is an interesting one because, I've discussed this with friends, and women tend not to have as much trouble thinking about their mother's sex life as men do. But for me, it was a hurdle, particularly with these very graphic letters that are really sexually explicit in ways. So, that was kind of a hard thing to overcome. And I remember when I first got into the book and started it out in Eastern Europe to bring my family over, before even getting into my mother's relationship with Reuven, I was a couple of years into research of just finding out what went on from people in Eastern Europe who came to the Holy Land. And I remember once taking a walk with Fred Block, who's out here, Fred, and complaining to him, saying, why did I get into all of this? I wanted to write about my mother in these letters, and here I am dealing with 2 generations before them trying to get there. And Fred's answer was simple, saying, that's your way of avoiding talking about your mother's sex life. And I think he was right. So in any event, it made for a different kind of a book than, it might have been had I, had the letters not been so explicit. And then, I just throw out quickly at the end, I found myself resenting Reuven. And I've come to characterize that as prenatal edible resentments. Because, it's funny, I'm defensive. I was defensive of her, and I thought I was kind of at times being unfair of him while writing and had to check myself. Because he was struggling also. He was having a hard time. But I sided with her, understandably, perhaps justifiably.
So we should clarify for the audience that Robert had access to the letters that Reuven wrote his mother, Zipporah. He did not have access to the letters she wrote back, which leads me to the question, how much is made up in the novel and how much actually happened?
Well, it's really a mix. In the earlier books, I had very little to go by. I knew, for example, that the family boarded a boat to take them to the Holy Land. They left in the early 1880s. That was before the pogroms were happening. They did this wholly for religious reasons. They wanted to follow a religious course. Yosef Siv, my great-grandfather, was hoping to have his bar mitzvah in Jerusalem when they set out. But all I knew is they boarded a ship to go, a boat, not a ship. So they could have taken any one of numerous routes. It might have even been an inland waterway that took them someplace south. That was the quickest way to get down there, through the Black Sea. Or more commonly through the Baltic and then cutting across somewhere in Germany, present what is the German Empire, or France, which were very anti-Semitic areas. I mean, this was a dangerous undertaking for them to do. So I had to invent the entire trip. I did know that after all the struggles of getting there, when they finally arrived in Ottoman Palestine, they didn't have enough money to bribe the border people to let them into Jerusalem. So they had to go to Cyprus and work in Cyprus for 2 years, building roads for the British to get enough graft money, basically, to take them there. But aside from those broad things, it's all fiction, really. When we get into the later, subsequent parts of the I did have the letters. I did have different family notes and things that told me things. So in those instances, they're pretty accurate and pretty well followed course. But, you know, dealing with letters Reuben is sending, you know, it doesn't tell the whole story. There's a wide background of what's going on and what, you know, people faced. I mean, there are a lot of surprises for me. When my mother came to this country and I looked at the date, she arrived the week of the 29 crash. I mean, here's a single woman from Palestine coming to a country at that point, which is also quite anti-Semitic, and trying to find work. You know, incredible struggles there. And you don't really get that from Reuben's letters. You'll see, as a matter of fact, as we go on, what you do get from his letters.
In the novel, you describe rather strange, certainly to modern readers, customs, especially about newborn boys being given to neighbors to raise. Can you describe that? Did it really happen in your family?
What do you find strange about that? From my research, what I found many instances of Jewish families giving children to neighbors to raise, but it's orphans generally, or for financial need. To do it for superstitious reasons, as this was done. I haven't found other examples, but my mother and another aunt, you know, told me and a cousin the same story independently of to ward off the evil after the early children died of circumcision infections when they had another son. The issue was, is he going to live or not? And that whole episode that I got into is fiction, really, but I knew the broad outline of what went on there. And the story that I had was that to ward off the evil spirits, she dressed him like a girl, which wasn't unusual. I have family photos of uncles and aunts, and my Uncle Morris is dressed as a girl, as a little boy. But to ward off the evil spirit, she was told, presumably, to let neighbors raise him. And presumably she didn't kiss him until his 13th birthday, his bar mitzvah, when he was an adult. So, you know, it's unique to my family, perhaps, or perhaps it's more common and just not out there in the literature.
Did you want to talk about some of the other superstitions?
Oh, yeah. Jews are very superstitious, or can be very superstitious. One of the ones I came across in my own work, in the Baltic journey, I have one of the young children on the boat dying. I mean, immigrant boats were just packed and disease and so on, rampant. And they have to go ashore to bury him. For Jews, burial at sea is unacceptable. And part of the reasoning of that, or the major reasoning of that, is when the Messiah comes, presumably all of us here who are Jewish will, as well as everyone in the past who has lived, will go through tunnels and caves and find their way to Jerusalem for the Messiah's presence. And in burials, they found many people buried with sticks in their hands or little shovels in their hands. in order for them to dig their way to Jerusalem. But there are lots of other strange superstitions, like when you hear something good or evil, spitting 3 times, both for good and for evil, which is strange. You would think it would be one or the other, but they balance out in some strange way. Pulling your ear when sneezing. Some argue you should pull the right ear. Some argue you should pull the left ear. It's argued by some you should pull both ears. Take your pick. Closing religious books when they're open, so when you go away from them, so evil spirits can't get in. Not naming children after the living, and amulets, which plays a big part in the Rabbi's Suitcase, but the power of amulets, and people carried them with them when they traveled for good luck. They had them and posted in their houses for good luck.
Can you discuss some of the ways young, smart, ambitious women like your mother, Zipporah, born in the Jerusalem Orthodox community during the early 20th century, how might she have felt constrained? How might she not?
It's interesting. I was just reading a Chekhov novella last night, trying to fall asleep and not think about being here. And it's a story about, it's a coming of age story. And this young boy is traveling. And at some point he's taken care of by a very attractive woman who is a mother kind of figure. She gives him food. There's really no food there. And he sort of falls in love with her. And then Chekhov has him raise the question. And the question is, what was a woman for? Now, you would never ask a question like, what was a man for? I mean, this is a whole... And by the way, this was written 1880s, so this is approximately the time my grandparents were coming into the Holy Land. My mother was up against incredible odds. It was a man's world that she was living in. Men dominated the family. Women were not allowed to get much of an education beyond what was needed to raise a family and keep a household. I did come across, my mother saved her report cards, some of them. I have a 3rd grade report card. For those of you who read Hebrew, I can even pass around a comment later on, a copy. And in the 3rd grade, she was in Petah Tikva at the time. The family was starving in Jerusalem, and they sent her and her sister to Petah Tikva because they were growing food there, and they had food there. So this is summer semester 1919. She got an excellence in behavior, an excellence in attention. She was good in neatness and cleanliness. In the Bible, excellent. Prayer, excellent. Hebrew, very good. Jewish history, excellent. Arithmetic, okay. We're getting into something here, excellent. Observation, not quite sure what that is. Excellent. Penmanship, good. Music, very good. Physical education, very good. Sewing, good. But when you see the breakdowns on some of these things, looking at the research, the amount of time that was spent on housekeeping things in the classroom for girls was substantial. Girls were raised to be housekeepers. They learned enough arithmetic to take care of the house. They learned to read enough for prayer and religious studies, but nothing much broader than that. So, and there was no women's movement at the time. So, she was out there on her own. One of the stories she told, which I always found very, very memorable, was occasionally they'd have a chicken to eat, and they would cut it up into the exact number of people that were in the family. And sometimes my grandfather would come home with a friend from shul for dinner. And my mother, as the eldest, was instructed when the chicken came around to say, "No, thank you, I don't like chicken." So there would be enough pieces of chicken for the whole family. So the men got the cream, her brothers got the cream off top of milk when they had it. They all had early heart attacks, which the women didn't have. So it was a double-edged sword, I suspect, in ways. I don't know how much of that they got in there. But women weren't allowed out into the world, have ambitions outside of the family, or worst of all, show or express sexual desire.
So in the first part of the book, you focus on the earlier generation, Zipporah's grandparents, your great-grandparents. The next two parts, the focus is on Zipporah's generation. Can you give us some examples of how these two generations differ?
Yeah, there are some nice ones, and I just happen to have them bookmarked. Early generation, 1883. My great-grandfather, they're in Cyprus, as I mentioned, trying to get to the Holy Land. And that's where he meets the woman he will later marry. This is after his bar mitzvah there. As he wandered the beach on the first warm Sunday afternoon in March, Yosef was shocked to find Chanka watching ripples of water splashing her feet. Spotting her toes speaking out from beneath the long dress she had raised to keep dry, he nervously began circling around to avoid embarrassment. Chanka noticed him and tried to excuse herself. "My mother told me the minerals and salt seawater are good for you. She and my sisters will be back soon. They've gone further up the beach. Be careful, your dress is getting wet. I have to go." Yosef stammered, blushing and turning away to avoid seeing her naked feet as she stepped onto dry sand. Until this moment, they had never spoken to each other when it wasn't allowed. Others had always been present. Pretending he wasn't there, Chanka turned away. Joseph struggled to find the right words. "I have to go. I'm sorry I didn't see you. It was an accident," he apologized, wondering if she could hear the pounding of his heart. "We won't do anything wrong," he added, regretting his words instantly. Joseph wanted to look up and make eye contact. They both kept glancing around nervously. Noticing her foot outside the hem of her dress, he quickly pointed to a bug nearby, trying to deflect attention from what he had seen. "I never saw one like that. Every word he spoke, no matter what he said, was sinful. But it didn't seem to matter any longer. They were alone together. It couldn't be undone. And he didn't want it undone." "Like what?" Chanka asked, sliding the renegade foot beneath her dress as he moved a step closer to inspect the odd insect. Trying to prolong the moment, he added, "I've never seen one that color. How many legs does it have?" As the bug burrowed into the sand, all he could think of was the lingering image of the uneven nail on the big toe of Chanka's left foot. So, fast forward 45, 50 years, my mother, Zipporah, is 15, 16. They're at a point already when men and women can meet privately and talk with each other privately to some degree, but intimacy was definitely out of the question. And she was pushing the boundaries hard. And she and Reuven are out walking together, and it starts raining, and he suggests they go back to his room, and she couldn't bring herself to say no. The thought of being alone with him was both exciting and frightening. Once there, she tried to stare at the bed that loomed so large in the tiny room. She tried not to stare at the bed. Sorry about that. Reuven politely settled her into a chair, lit the paraffin heater, wrapped his extra blanket around her shoulders, then brought out a small piece of cake for them to share. I'm so glad you're taking English classes. It's very important these days. Not only speaking, but reading and writing as well. He was pushing her in that direction. Yes, I know, I really want to learn English. I told you I have relatives in New York. If I can't find work here, I'd like to visit them, maybe even move there. Reuven touched her shoulder gently, then walked to his bed, beckoning her to sit with him. Her mother's words resonated in her mind. May God help you if you do anything to dishonor your grandfather's memory. As she got up, straightened her dress, and crossed the room. To her surprise, sitting next to him came naturally. Before long, they were sitting side by side, shoes off under the blanket. She lay motionless while he playfully kissed her hands. Startled by a rustling sound from across the room, both jumped up abruptly to see a mouse enjoying the cake on the table. In any event, they didn't consummate the relationship at that time, but they did within a year during Holy Week, this time of the year. And I get into that extensively in the novel.
So Reuven saw himself as a very modern 20th century man, someone who wasn't bound by old world ways in his relationship with Zipporah. But this doesn't seem to have been entirely the case as their relationship progressed. Can you explain some of the ways Zipporah felt both attracted to and then held back by Reuven's attitudes toward women?
Yeah. He was her freedom from her family. I mean, she was locked in. She was the eldest of 7 children. She was a mother. Her mother had terrible pregnancies. She was in bed with pains. Every 2 years, she had another kid. And my mother had to really raise the family. So, and that was what her future was, what she was cut out for. And Reuven comes in, and here's this guy who was educated in a high-class yeshiva in Lithuania, Pavnes, and he sort of knew the world, and he introduced the world. I mean, she told me of going with him to see an opera. I think it was Aida in Hebrew in Jerusalem. He took her to plays in the new Hebrew University that Albert Einstein had just opened while they were there. So, this was a chance for her to live a life that she could see the world, she could travel, she could read, she could learn to write and read. So, this was a bright thing. And Reuven saw himself very much as a 20th century man. But, his letters kind of belie that in many ways. For example, she comes here, as I mentioned, the Depression just began. Finding work as a woman anyway was impossible. As a Jewish woman, it was doubly impossible. She was staying with an uncle and aunt, and the uncle didn't want her to go out on her own. I mean, it was like still being at home in some way. And she had to really navigate this, and finally found a job working for a jeweler in Brooklyn through a connection she had met on the boat while she was traveling to Palestine, to this country. And wrote to him finally to say, that I found work. And she was afraid. She wrote to him without mentioning her fears and discomfort. She assured him that her boss, as Americans call them, treated her very respectfully. His response took her by surprise, and here I'm quoting straight from his letter. Here you are, a shop girl. This naturally will lead to moonlighting, to the necessity to subjugate yourself to any superior, to a complete abandonment of principles. From here to the streets, the distance is not great. Her stomach clenched as she read. If you continue pursuing such jobs, I must tell you in no uncertain words, I can never marry.
Okay.
So, tough road to follow. In terms of education, and this is right along our lines, Reuven is studying in Strasbourg, and let's see how we're doing. Maybe for time reasons, I won't get into reading the whole thing here. He's basically starving. He went there. His brother was studying there. His brother had found a job, but again, a kind of anti-Semitic environment. He couldn't find work. He was just there a couple of months, and he was on top of it. We'll get into it later. He got a letter that she was pregnant, but he wants to try and get her to have her father pay for his boat fare so he can come back to Palestine and get out of there at least, and get her father, if he'll agree to a formal engagement agreement, be betrothed to his daughter, which would make my mother honorable. My grandfather said, I'll pay your way back, and I'll pay for law studies in the New Hebrew University that's just opened. And Reuven is very clear in what he says, that I'll come back and I'll start there, but that's all unacceptable. I want a degree from a first-class university, either in London or in Paris. I want a law degree so I can go on and be the founder of this new nation we want to build. So he's clear about what his aims are. However, when she finally finds a job in Brooklyn in an orphanage, a Jewish orphanage, and she's basically splitting what she's earning between her family, who has come over, and sending him half to support him in Paris while he's studying at the Sorbonne before they get married. She decides that she really would like to do some studying on her own and enroll in night school to learn how to write. She's ambitious and wants to be a writer, and she does write some interesting plays later on. But when Zipporah told Reuven that she was again thinking about enrolling in night school, he discouraged her. Again, I'm quoting from his letter. I know several female students that have graduated and how insignificant they are compared to you. All their scientific pretensions only evoke disgust, since they lack the main quality that turns a woman into an ideal and gives her the power to dominate men. They lack the truth you possess. Don't think that receiving a university diploma will make you dearer to me. You are dear to me as you are. Read what you can. So that's quite an obstacle. This is the man who is her ticket to a fuller life. And this is his response to her wanting to go out there and try and do something on her own.
You know, in the interest of time, maybe skip this part because we've already made clear she's ambitious in her own right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you portray your mother having had an abortion. How did you find out about that?
I only had Reuven's letters, and he never says abortion, and I almost had the sense that he foresaw his future and didn't want that written there. Just a hunch. I could be wrong. But he arrives in Strasbourg, and there's a letter waiting for him, in which she, I think, tells him that she's pregnant and so on, but he refers to her illness, and clearly she's very ill, and is in big trouble. I mean, there's no avoiding that. It goes back and forth. But later on, he writes a letter that pretty well makes it clear, I think. This is already 2 years later, after all of this has happened, when he reminisced about his hesitation over wearing a condom during the time together in his room. Quote, how alien it seemed to my naked chest when my naked chest touched your exposed breasts. I recall the look in your eyes, and I asked you about the need for a condom. You were silent. I saw your breasts heaving with impatience, your legs spreading, eager to feel the contact with my hardening, probing member, finding its way through the titillating moisture into the holy of holies. I understood that you too regarded the condom as profane and tore it off. So any artificial barrier between us seemed sacrilegious. And the terminology is very interesting because he's using the religious terminology that forbids this behavior and turning it into the religious thing that it is today.
I mean, there's no obvious concrete answer, but how common do you think abortion was in Mandate Palestine?
It was very common. It was illegal, strictly illegal, except to save the mother's life. I guess all of you must know when a Jewish fetus is deemed viable. I see puzzled faces. When it graduates from medical school. It was done very extensively underground, and there were many infections, many people posing as qualified people who did perform them. So, it was definitely a phenomenon, but you probably know more about this than I do. Do you know, or is it common in Israel today?
Well, today it's a different story. Today abortion is legal in Israel. I mean, one has to go through a committee of a social worker, maybe 2 doctors, but it's the committees are mainly pro forma. Most women who want an abortion in Israel today are able to get one. Not everybody, but most. What's been fascinating to me is, as I'm sure you all know, the Haredim in Israel are more and more powerful. They now basically control the government. There are many very Orthodox Jews from Brooklyn who moved to Israel. So, and the ultra-Orthodox in this country are very much part of the anti-abortion movement in this country. And so far, it has not seemed to take a hold in Israel. And that's quite interesting to me. Now, it is, of course, it is the case that Jewish law, in some cases, mandates abortion. I mean, abortions are absolutely essential, are absolutely demanded to save a woman's life. In fact, if I can digress for 1 second into the post-Dobbs world, the Supreme Court ruling that overturned Roe, when different states started suing to restore it, some of those who joined were Jewish women who said, "You are violating my Jewish right. I need to live out my religion's demands. I need to be able to have access to an abortion." In fact, there's for a while, not so much now, but I remember a number of years ago, the Jewish wing of the pro-choice movement in this country adopted a saying attributed to a 19th century rabbi: "No woman is required to build the world by destroying herself." And that has been interpreted as a very pro-choice statement. But let me just say that I am very impressed, as someone who studies abortion, I am very impressed by how realistically you wrote about an abortion would have taken place in that era.
Yeah, it was all fiction.
Anyway, well, let's stop here. Let me ask Howard. I mean, we were scheduled for 3 to 4, but we came a little late. Do we want to have a few minutes of Q&A?
Absolutely.
Well, how about 10 minutes ask Robert questions?
Let me just ask you one other question.
Sure.
In this country, in terms of abortion, are Jews more prone to it than non-Jews? Or
There's not great data. Only one study I saw about Jewish women, there was an estimate they got about 3% of all abortions, which is higher than the percent of Jewish women in this country. What I do know from personal experience studying this world, Jewish providers, Jewish doctors and nurses are overrepresented in the world of abortion provision. They are not constrained by the Catholic backgrounds or the evangelical backgrounds of some of their colleagues. Okay, so and I should say we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A, and then Robert's books are available. Robert's book is available back there. There's also 2 copies of my recent book, which discusses the response by the abortion providing community to the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe. But if you're only going to buy one, buy his. Anyway, so let's hear some comments or questions.
Growing up, how much of this story was in your family?
You know, it's the old story of people who have lived very traumatic childhoods don't like to talk about them. So as a matter of fact, we tried to do a documentary with my mother. We had a friend who, when she was in her early 90s, she lived to 100. And I tried to get her, while this was being filmed, to talk. She didn't want to talk about any of that. So the stories came down piecemeal, mostly from the male side of my uncle Asher, who was a rabbi, had a diary that told a lot of this, but it's spotty as to what was there. And for me, a big part of it was trying to make these people real. I never understood the interest of people doing family trees with names and dates. That always seemed, I wanted to know more about what was going on rather than just researching that. So for me, it was wanting to put words into the mouths of these people and try and construct them. And one of the most satisfying parts of the whole process was my cousin Moshe, who's an Orthodox Jew was very helpful throughout. He corrected my Judaism, which is not all that good. He at the end of it all, thanked me for making these people real people, putting words in them. How accurate it is, I don't know. But yeah.
Hi, I have a kind of provocative question. So, as I understand, and I haven't read the book, and I want to read the book, I'm going to buy the book. But you say that you only read his letters. And you say you read us.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit? I'm having a hard time.
If I didn't wish to be provocative, I would stand up.
It's okay. I have no problem with provocative.
Okay, I am concerned that you have his letters and you read to us excerpts, even about the condom. What he asks her is his voice. It's his eyeglasses. It's his life. And he reads to her, he asks her about the condom, and of course you're not there, so you fill in, she does not answer. That's an alert right there. And then he goes on and gives us a bunch that justifies it for him of the holiest of holies. I am concerned that because I feel for your mother, that what may be portrayed or understood as a great love might have just been dependence. Many women understand this, cloaked with everything that she needed, burying her own, as you said, aspirations in her heart. But I don't know how in the book you have been able to make her real, although I trust that you have. Because when everything is told from the male point of view, it is lost to us as women.
Yeah. The relationship went on for a long time. It was 5+ years. And it's clear from the tone of his letters and what I can pick up that she comes into her own slowly and starts realizing, yes, she was depending upon him, but she is building a personality of her own that lets her move on beyond him. And, well, I won't give away how it resolves, but there comes a point where it's clear to her that this is, she has to go with it herself. And, yeah, I agree entirely, yeah. Anyone else? Anything else?
Way back.
Yeah,
You might want to come a little forward, if you don't mind.
so, okay, sorry. You talked about your family, and I wondered if you ever made use of searching a database called the All Lithuania Database or litvasig.org, because they have 10,000 records from Ariola.
Yeah, I did research extensively, in databases. And, the Evo Library in New York and their research material was very helpful, and all of that. They, by the way, have that early 1,000-page manuscript of mine that we had to cut down. And I donated Reuben's letters to them, which they very much wanted. Yeah.
Do you know what happened to your mother's letters? Did you try to contact someone to get them?
Well, my guess would, I have been unable to make contact with his family. I sent out a couple of letters, never got anything back. My guess would have been he's very cruel about her letters in places. He, corrects her spelling and, tells her to pay more attention to, her handwriting and so on. But no, I do have copies of her practicing writing when she was here. She said that. But I have very little of her directly. It's coming through him and through other family sources.
Okay, those interested in Robert's book at the back table there. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here. So the books will be at the table in the back there, and you're welcome to hang out, look for books, talk, and I appreciate you all being here. And thank you so much, Carole. Thank you so much, Robert. This was great.